Welcome, everybody, to a work in progress where we unpack the human side of innovation. Thinkering Collective, we believe who you are shapes what you build, and your why shapes who you build it for. Today's guest is Werner Roland, Future Worlds, a collective vision for real-world problem solving. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, so in the past, with the Gifted and Talented program that I run at the French American School of Denver, kids are doing a variety of different projects that are kind of anything that they can think of, but they're not connected to each other. So it's kind of hard to come together as a group and say, like, this is what we've accomplished this year. And so with the Thinkering, I decided to make something that the students were connected with. And so they're solving community problems, whether that's our school community or our larger city community or neighborhood community. They're going to think about what do they see in our neighborhood or in our school that needs improving or changing. And then they're going to figure out how to fix that problem. And they can either work together or independently. And then at the end of the year, we can kind of see how all these things connected and what we did and what impact we made. So I'm hoping that it will just be a little bit more impactful and more important for them and lasting for them to see, like, oh, this is what I accomplished this year.
That's awesome. It's all about, taking these natural gifted and talented gifts and then giving them purpose with like agency and authenticity and being able to really empower yourself to make a difference. And that's not something a lot of students get to jump in and tackle. What age group are you working with?
I'm working with kindergarten through fifth grade. So I'm anticipating it to look a little different for kindergarten and first grade. Maybe they'll do a project like, hey, we don't have recycling in our building. We need to figure out how to fix that. And so maybe their project will look something like that. Whereas fourth and fifth grade, they like to play soccer at recess, and we either have wood chips or asphalt. And so they're constantly getting hurt and complaining about having a safe place. So that might be a project that they want to tackle, is like, how can we fund getting a soccer pitch? How can we design a soccer pitch? And so that might take, a good chunk of them that are interested in playing soccer to kind of work together and figure out, what do we do? How do we get this to happen? And who do we need to contact? And what do we need to know? Like last year, we got a new playground and it actually got held up with the city for licensing for a long time, and the students couldn't play on the playground. So that's something that they can already be thinking of. It's like, oh, no, we need a license to be able to build a soccer pitch, but how do we do that?
Yeah, it's like using GT education as a vehicle for collective problem solving. It's so cool, especially that age group. Why this specific program? What's the larger goal for you as the creator?
Yeah, I think growing up, I struggled with a lot of things that now that I'm in this field and certified in gifted education and learning more about it, working with kids, I'm realizing maybe when I was a kid, I was gifted. We just didn't have a word for it. And that's where a lot of these, sensitivities or quirks that I thought were just personality quirks were actually like gifted traits that I was struggling with. And both of my own kids are gifted, and one of them is in the program at the school. And so it's just fun to be able to like see it through my eyes and their eyes, and how that's different and how it's giving them something to feel challenged, but also helping them with the places that they struggle, like maybe friendships or perfectionism. Like at the start of the podcast, I had to move something because I knew that that was going to bother me the entire time with that perfectionist issues. So it's fun to be able to tell them, like, yes, being gifted is about being really good at something or being really smart or having things come easily, but that's not all that it is. Sometimes there's things that gifted kids struggle with that they need support with. And I think that's the part that typically gets left out. And so helping them to navigate those things, but then also giving them something in school that's like, here's a challenge or a problem that we can solve. And that way they're not feeling bored or stagnant in their education with the mainstream education.
Yeah, it's a word I didn't learn until we started Thinkering Collective was the twice exceptional learner. And, learning like, oh, that's what I was. And like I was a gifted student, but I had ADHD, and not really understanding like, oh, how that plays into things, and the like rejection, fear of rejection, or just the, learning and going about different things, ways, or being passion driven, not, really results driven, not what's best for me, but what feels good in the moment. So I was going through school, and I remember situations where a teacher would jokingly say, like, if you want to, just go sit in the hall and teach yourself. And I would get up and go outside and do the math book in 1 week. and get through it. And not that I was good at math, I was terrible about it, but I could sit and, repetitively go through these things and not really understand them, but turn in the work and get the A, and then be free to read fantasy novels and dive deep into those things, or like work on developing 3D models, or programming websites. And then those are all skills and awesome things, but there was no room for it in the classroom. And if I had just realized then, like, oh, there's a struggle here where I'm like gifted, things come easy, but I'm not motivated, but there's a reason why. It's not just me being a silly me. It's like, mental wirings, and I can address these things and work on them. It's such a fascinating thing to break down, and to see that you're working with students at a young age to remove those barriers that I'm still, like, at 40, still, like, navigating and trying to figure out, is super awesome. With the capstone project, Future Worlds, what inspired the, name right there? That's a great one.
Well, at first, when I first started the project, it was much bigger. I work in a French American immersion school. And so I was thinking, like, how can I get these students involved in the world and seeing how we're connected? So I was thinking, like, oh, maybe we could partner with like a school in France or a school in Canada and have these partnerships and communications with other students, and also finding other students like them. And then I realized, you know what? Like, our own school and community needs to have these problems solved first. So when I was designing it, I was thinking of, like, bigger issues and bigger problems that they might see in the world. And I was like, we have stuff right at home that maybe for this first year, that's what we work on. And then we can grow and grow and make that project reach wider. But we start at home and local first. And traditionally, our school had a lot of privileged kids, a high socioeconomic family groups. A lot of them are coming from private French schools, because our school is the first and only right now charter French immersion school, so free public school. And so I think we'll be changing our dynamics a lot at the school, and what kind of population we have. It'll be a lot more mixed. But the last few years, it's been a lot of kids who are very privileged. And in talking with my students, I'm realizing, like, they don't realize how privileged they are. We were talking about, during Women's History Month, we were talking about a pilot who's young, and one of the first female pilots who's flown all around the world and did some really amazing flights. And she talked about how her parents immigrated here when she was young, and that was the first time she was on a plane, but she never got on a plane again until she was 18 years old. And she's a pilot, and that's what she does. And so they were like, wow, that's crazy. I've been on a plane, this many times. We go on a plane every year. And so just opened up a conversation of, like, yeah, that's a gift, and that's a privilege that not everybody has. Some people spend their whole lives not leaving their hometown. And so I wanted to kind of open that up to service projects in our neighborhood and help those kids who are very privileged think about, what is our neighborhood lacking and what can we do to improve it for everyone, not just for you who has so much, but how can we improve it for everyone in our entire community? So I think that's why I kind of shrunk it down and was like, let's focus here first. And that helps our community, but it also helps those students learn and grow in different ways too, that maybe they're not used to.
When I was living in Manhattan, I lived in Washington Heights, and I was fascinated by how many people I met locally in the neighborhood, who I'd mentioned, like, something at Madison Square Garden, and they say, "Oh, I've always wanted to go." And I'd talk to them and find out, oh, they've never been 16 blocks south or 16 blocks north. They've just lived in Washington Heights their whole life, and they've never gone down to Harlem or the West End, or there's just been no desire, no need, or that one need, no access. Just thinking about that, how you're in New York City, it feels like the center of the world, but yet your opportunity, your circumstance, your situation for so many of these people is siloed to a few blocks and not getting to leave it, even though there's public transit and a train ticket is only $2. That's the life of so many people lived that I ran into. In your capstone project, one thing that really struck me was the term moving away from siloed enrichment to, like, community rooted impact. And I hadn't really thought of that term, siloed enrichment, for what does that shift look like in practice?
Yeah. Well, like I said before, the students were really focused on individual projects. And so they were just like, here's what I really love to do. And I want to figure out how to make that work for my project, and not thinking in a bigger picture of, is that helping anything? Is it solving any problems? Is it useful for anything? Or is it, like the Bluetooth speaker was super amazing. She learned while she was making the Bluetooth speaker. But then what happened after? There was no lasting impact. And it was just her project and her impact for herself. Like, good job, I did that. And now I move on. And she probably, maybe will remember it in a year or two, probably not much after that. So I wanted them to have a bigger impact for themselves and for other people. So
It's great that it also kind of starts that entrepreneurial mindset too. Oh, I can build something, I can be the solution. I don't have to just participate, I can innovate. One of the big questions behind your work is, what kind of world do you want to help create? What happens when students start to answer that question in real terms?
yeah, well, I think there's probably going to be some answers that I'm like, there's not much we can do about that problem. I agree with you. I want to solve that problem too, but it's a big problem. So I think that's going to be a learning process for me too, of like, how do we navigate that together? What does that look like? How do we talk about big problems that we see in the world that we can't solve? And how do I, as an educator, navigate things that I'm not really allowed to talk about with the students, or can only talk about in a very general way without getting any emotions or feelings involved, when those emotions and feelings are going to come from everybody that's talking about the problem. If my students are talking about what's happening in education right now and worried about, what that's going to look like for them, are they going to have books in their classroom that show and reflect who they are? I don't know. Luckily, we live in Colorado, so that's protected right now. But in other parts of the country, yeah, you might not have books with children of color or wearing a hijab. Whereas in my classroom, you do. You will see that when you go take a book from the shelf. And so those questions might come up, and it will definitely be a learning process of how we can navigate that. We can definitely, I guess that's a good thing about having it be local right now, is if they see a problem like that locally, those are problems that we can solve locally. In a larger scale for our country, it's not something we can really tackle right now.
That's what's cool too about it is, when you scaffold it out, if a child sees like a global international problem that they really want to address and work towards and tackle, it can be broken down and scaffolded to the first step is right down the street, and that's step one. So let's focus there. And that's how we get, across the world and bringing water to, people who need it, or something like that, is let's go learn what is clean water and how do we get it and where does it come from. Let's do that locally first. And then how do we clean up our local river and pick up trash there? And then all those local projects that build to that big vision. So the scaffolding aspect to me is really cool. So in the Future Worlds project, like, what does it actually look like on the ground for the students? Like, what are they doing and who are they working with?
Yeah, so the first step is we're going to learn about what the project looks like, what it's going to entail, and kind of get them thinking about problems. And then we're going to partner with as many local experts as we can. We have some parents that volunteer in the past, or I have them tell me every year, like, is there an expertise that you have that you want to share with us? So hopefully we'll find some parents in our community that are willing and open to do that. I have a friend who works in nonprofits, so maybe we can partner with her. The really cool thing that she does in her job is they help get laws passed here in Colorado. And so maybe sometimes we can go sit in on one of those sessions and see how that happens and what that looks like, and talk with them about, how did you get this to this point? How did you get people voting about it just being a topic that you cared about, and learn those processes? So we have a lot of knowledge in our community, and we just need to jump out there and tap into it. Not a lot of background information I can do on that right now, because I don't know what problems they want to solve. So that'll be kind of a learning curve for me too, of how to make that more efficient, probably next year, of like anticipating who I need to connect with before. It'll probably be a little bit slow start this year, but I'm really excited about it, and finding all the ways we can partner and the people that we can partner with in our community.
Yeah, that's going to be the big bridge, is bringing in those community partners and getting them bought in and engaged. And once that happens, like, sky's the limit. That's so cool. One of my favorite things is how there's kind of micro learning elements inside lessons focused on the quote soft skills, but the necessary skills that really should be focused on more, like you were saying earlier, targeting perfectionism, executive function, public speaking, not being afraid to share ideas and have them critique all of those things that are so hard to navigate as a neurotypical person. And then you have gifted students have that extra layer to navigate. What was you talked a little bit about the inspiration behind that earlier. What do you see as the, I guess, how do you bridge that and tie that into the lesson?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I picked those top three social emotional skills that we're working on this year is perfectionism, executive function, and public speaking, because that seems to be the ones that most of my students are struggling with. I send home parent surveys every year, and the students fill out a survey at school about, what's something that you're really good at that you find really easy, and what's something that's harder for you or more difficult. And oftentimes parents will say it's definitely perfectionism and organization. And the kids will usually come up with things that, are maybe not using those words, but are saying the same thing. And so I wanted to focus on three main things that we can really dive deep into and practice skills. And I think these ones tie really well into everything that we're doing. We need to know how to organize our thoughts and ideas, organize our materials, and able to get things done. So if we're not keeping track of what step we are on and what we need to do next, then we won't be able to get anywhere. So we're going to really target those executive function skills. I'm building a workbook for them to kind of keep track of everything. And we'll have check-ins because that's something that's been typically difficult for them is, if they let it go, then they're like dropping some steps and want to jump straight to the end. So I'll kind of build that into their brainstorming and how they're working on that. We'll have just checks along the way. And then for the perfectionism, we're going to talk a lot about famous failures. How many times did Einstein fail school? How many, mistakes were at the beginning of important discoveries or important inventions? And so we're going to talk a lot about that and first look at it and think about it and then relate that to themselves. And we'll talk about that throughout the whole process of even just as simple as drawing out their sketch for whatever, maybe they're engineering something, maybe they want to fix our little free libraries that we have outside the school. And if they draw up a design and they're frustrated and erasing it because it's not looking exactly how they wanted it in their brain, just kind of talking through those situations. Or even down to the end, maybe they do want to build that soccer pitch for our school, but the license gets denied. What do we do? Do we let that just be a failure and sulk about it and don't do anything? Or do we problem solve to keep going and figure out how to resolve it? So,
That's great. I love the perfectionism aspect because I had these memories of being in school and taking notes, and like I would get, 2 lines in and make a mistake, or my fonting would get sloppy and I would start over. And then I'd realize, okay, I've spent 30 minutes of this hour-long lesson trying to get organized with these immaculate notes that are beautiful without any errors or scribble. And I've got 3 or 4 pages here that mean nothing, where I've just started over and over and over. I've retained nothing the educator is talking about. And now I'm not in a position to retain the next 30 minutes. So that's just such a good thing to tackle. Modeling this process alongside your students, you talked about how to be a learning experience for you as well. And that's something that I really like about becoming a peer with them. What's it been like to do work alongside, thinking about doing the work alongside the students, not just for them? How does that change the energy behind the project?
I think it really helps with them seeing how that process works. If I'm doing it with them, working towards and showing them, like, oh, I have something I'm passionate about and want to see a change in my community or that I want to create. And I'm going to go through that process with you. And when I make a mistake, or when things don't go exactly how I wanted, or when I don't get the response I wanted, or if I'm trying to present that and I'm getting nervous because I'm talking in front of a group of people, what that looks like, and that's not just a kid problem. It's not just a them problem. Everybody is struggling through this, and it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay for it to feel hard. And I think that's really one of the most important things is for gifted students, oftentimes things come so naturally and easily to them that anytime something is hard or they don't get it on the first time, it's so frustrating because they've never felt that way before. And so modeling what that looks like of like, oh, that really makes me frustrated that, I was drawing my picture and this line is not straight and now I've erased it 3 times, but I'm going to keep going. I'm not just going to throw my pencil down. And I used to model this for my kindergarten classrooms all the time of like, and I'm not an artist, so I would need to draw things for them to show them how to illustrate a story or a sentence they were writing. And so I would start drawing, and it would be like a sincere mistake. I don't know how to draw an elephant. This is my first time, guys, and sometimes I would model that. I would make a mistake and I would get mad and I would throw the pencil down and I'd be like, I'm so mad. This is not what it's supposed to look like. That doesn't look like an elephant. And even the kids would then be like, oh, it's okay, Miss Verna. Like, you can keep trying. Try again. It looks great. You're doing your best. And so they would also practice that kind of caring back and that empathy. And then we could talk about, well, how can you do that to yourself too? How can you talk yourself through that when you make a mistake? You encouraged me to keep going and keep trying. How can you do that to yourself too? So I think
I love
that's
that.
going to really help with me having a project too, that they can really see like, oh, we're all here together and it's okay to make mistakes and move on and keep trying.
Sounds like the students give a lot of good inspiration. Who's helped you along the way during the development of this project and ideas? Has there been anybody who's come out of the corner and just like good ideas or inspiration, or people you want to shout out who just like you connected with throughout coming up with the ideas? Anyone in your school who's like been a rock star and had your back for the idea?
I still haven't rolled it out at my school yet. So that'll be really fun and really exciting to talk to parents and teachers about how that's going to shift. But honestly, all of you guys at Thinkering Collective have been so, so helpful in brainstorming and making connections. And that's been amazing. I think I was speaking with Evan not too long ago, and he was like, oh, I was thinking about, this other person who does this project who you might want to connect with. And so he connected us through email, and we'll be discussing, how we can partner and collaborate on different things. So that's really exciting. And I think I've met just a lot of really great people who are helping me brainstorm with that through the Thinkering Collective. And that's been probably the best experience so far of like getting this idea out there and thinking it through and then meeting other people that are like, oh yeah, this is something I'm doing that we can connect with.
The network effect is fun and real. You have your own awesome list of like partners and potential partners mapped out that you want to bring to the table for this project. I guess it's like I saw, I think, community gardens and city planners. And what kind of partners are you bringing to the table? Why and what role will they play in these student projects?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to find people that can give my students a little bit of guidance or a little bit of background knowledge, or even come in and teach a mini lesson about what it takes to get to where they are. For city planners or land planners, what does that look like to plan something out? And then how do you get it off the paper and into reality? And so that'll be a really great one because I think I'll probably have students who want to do projects like that. Finding people who are willing to come in and talk to us, I don't think will be a huge problem. I think a lot of people are really interested in helping the community and getting their passions out there. I have a friend who's an engineer and builds bridges, and so he did come last year and talk to one of my students, and that was super exciting to see her talk to like a real bridge builder and have them connect over that and ask questions. And I think that was really fun for him too, to like, oh yeah, this is my passion. It's not, I've been doing it for so many years, but now I'm reigniting that passion in myself. So it's even like a two-way win-win situation because the professionals that are coming in get to see that spark that maybe they've forgotten that they had.
That's what we're trying to do at Thinkering. It's just like remember that spark while we were all doing this. What's been the biggest hurdle that you've had to face in coming up with this project, or that you anticipate having to address?
Well, I think the roadblocks will be having kids that have a problem that they want to solve or a project they want to do that maybe we can't. And so that will be frustrating, and not knowing what they want to problem solve. I don't know how to anticipate that. So how to either like build up the back end and try to make it happen a little easier. So I guess that will also be, a practice of working on disappointments and what happens when things don't go how we want them to go, or we can't fulfill our idea. Happen with the students who I'm guessing will want to work on building a soccer pitch. We may or may not be leaving our school building next year because we are outgrowing our building. So we don't want to build a soccer pitch in a school that we're not going to be at next year for you to enjoy. So things like that, I think, will be hurdles and things that we'll need to overcome and think through. But the kids usually have really great ideas that, that even adults don't think of. So hopefully they'll have some problem solving to those roadblocks that we find too.
Absolutely. You're launching Future Worlds this fall?
Yes.
Awesome. And then in year one, what does success look like?
I think success looks like learning and problem solving our own projects. How are we going to change this next year to make it more efficient or to make it easier just to get to an end result? I think that there will be a lot of unknowns that I haven't thought to plan for. And so that will be really helpful in like having this first year of like, oh yeah, that was that. I really should have planned for that ahead of time. And next year I can. So I think just a lot of learning.
Like we're all about humanizing education at Thinkering Collective, and it can be taken in a whole lot of different directions. So somebody who's focused on the gifted and talented, and school administration and being a leader, like what does humanizing education mean to you, and how do we do that?
Yeah, I think it means meeting the students where they are, thinking about their own personal needs. What do we need to do to meet those needs as educators? I think a lot of times people think that gifted kids are like, oh, well, it's easy for them. They got this. We don't need to worry about them. And like when we think about differentiation in the classroom, we're really most of the time thinking about the ones who are struggling. And it might not look like struggling for a gifted kid because things come easily or they're getting there on their own. And so we don't think about them as much and how to challenge them. And so I think that's a big thing that I want to focus on is I don't want to give them more work or extra work. I want to give them meaningful work or challenging work. So it's not just like, well, I don't want to let my teacher know how easy this is for me because I'll just get more work. I want them to be like excited about sharing their knowledge and what that can look like in the project that we're doing and also in their classroom. Maybe that looks like expanding on the topic that they're learning about that's coming naturally or easily to them. Or maybe that's teaching students that are struggling with it. That's something that I really loved when I was a classroom teacher is I would have those students explain it in a different way because clearly the way I explained it, students are still struck. But if another student explains it, they can do it in a different way. And I would do this in kindergarten classrooms and it would work brilliantly where, the kid would sit down with them and be like, oh, here's my strategy. This is how I did it. And then that kid is like, that's how you do it. And it's like, yeah, I spent, a month trying to teach that to you. And it just took a few minutes of a kid explaining it in a different way.
Peer-to-peer connection is so powerful. What would you say to another educator out there who's ready to move just beyond worksheets and standardized testing and do something authentic with their students?
I think it's funny because one of the best pieces of advice I got in the early days of my teaching career is close the door and teach how you know how to teach or teach with passion. If it's not working to just read the script of the curriculum book, close the door and do what you know is right. As long as you have the results to back that up, that it's working, the kids are learning and growing and happy, then that's what's important. That's why we're there. We're not there to read a script that someone in an office wrote for students that they've never worked with. And so I think that's probably would be my advice to people wanting to shift or change or people that are coming into the profession is you're here for a reason. You have an instinct or some purpose that you came to teaching for. And so go with that. You know what you're doing. You know your students and they're changing every year. You have different set of students. What you did last year might not work. And it's certainly not going to work for every student. So you need to be able to have that flexibility to change and adapt your teaching to the students that you have. And only you are able to do that because you're there with them every day.
Those who are listening who want to support or connect around collaborating on the Future Worlds project, what's the best way to get in touch with you or reach out?
Email or text is probably the best way to get a hold of me. I can send you an email that you can link somewhere in the podcast.
Yeah, we can do that. Awesome.
Great.
And then any closing remarks, anything you want to leave our audience with?
I love being on this journey, and I think it's so exciting to work with educators, to connect with the Thinkering Collective, and to see people who are really passionate about moving forward in a different way, in the way that needs to happen. The future is changing. We're not educating kids for the same purpose anymore. And so it's exciting to know that there are people out there like all of us who see that and want to make that shift.